A reminder there from Vicky Treadell, the High Commissioner, that from two of our closest allies, the United States and the UK, the pressure at the moment on the Australian government is quite immense when it comes to climate response.
It is, and it's going to grow between now and the summit in Glasgow at the end of the year. Australia is now really the only developed economy that is a holdout on making a commitment to net zero by 2050, and the world's actually moving on even from that position now. There's widespread recognition that we're going to need to get to net zero earlier than that. So the longer that the Prime Minister isn't able to make this commitment, and I think the majority of Australians want him to make this commitment, all Australian states have made the commitment, Australian business has made the commitment. The only place he can't get a majority of support is within his own party room. And I think it's going to become increasingly difficult for the Prime Minister to walk that line between those in his party who don't want action on climate change and our commitments to the international community.
Yeah, it's an interesting balancing act, Kerry Chikarovski, but the Prime Minister, from my reading of it, looks like that's where he's heading. He said very clearly that the financial markets are already going in that direction, that the energy market is already shifting, that's where the dollars are going. That's the reality, is basically his argument, Kerry.
And I think you'll find, Kieran, that he's being supported in a lot of his arguments about moving faster on these targets now by more of the party room than people are giving the Liberal Party any credit for. I know there is still some reservations about it, but clearly there are a lot of very vocal members of that party room. And increasingly, even in the National Party room, there seems to be some movement towards getting better targets and getting them faster, for the Australian community. I think the UK High Commissioner is certainly entitled to her view. That's fine. But the really interesting thing is, I think, as you've just been pointed out by Emma, you've got all the states, most of the community, pretty well everyone in this country now saying we need to move faster. And the one thing I know about this Prime Minister is he's not tone deaf. He'll actually listen to and work with that community.
Yes, that's right. And I think that an example of not being tone deaf, Emma, today on show, the government putting in place this Women's Safety Summit. What have you made of the Prime Minister's address and the other contributions on this important intervention ahead of a new national plan on dealing with domestic violence to be implemented from next year?
I'm rather underwhelmed, I have to say, Kieran. I think the Prime Minister's address this morning was a little tone deaf. It was very light on commitments. And, of course, it comes a week after the government voted down or voted only to pass 6 of the 55 recommendations in Sex Discrimination Commissioner Kate Jenkins' report on safety at work. So I think Australian women are sort of saying, well, if you were really committed to this, why have you only implemented 6 of those 55 recommendations? Why did women around the country engage with that review, share often very personal, very difficult stories, some of which the Prime Minister read out in his address this morning. But the time for summits and talk fests is over. We know what needs to be done on women's safety and financial security in this country. A lot of people that are experts in this field around the country weren't even invited to the roundtables last week or to the summit to participate in the summit today. So while a commitment to hold a summit was seen as a good thing, it was announced early this year at the time that the government also said they accepted all 55 recommendations of Kate Jenkins' report in part or in principle. What we're seeing now, 6 months down the track, is much less actual action, much less commitment to acting on the advice they already have. And it seems to a lot of us like yet for more delaying tactics from really making meaningful change, both for women that work in the Parliament and women around our country, both at home and in their workplaces, to be safe and secure.
Kerry Chikarovski, your thoughts on this? And as Emma says, it has been a problem for way too long, and it's a scourge that the nation has to confront.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. And I'd have to disagree with Emma to a certain extent. I've actually been listening to the summit today, and I think the really interesting part about it is that there is still quite a divergent point of views about what needs to be done and how we need to address those issues. So I think bringing everybody together, and there are some incredible experts on these panels, and I need to give a shout out to your colleague Laura J. She's doing a very, very good job chairing these panels. But I think what we're looking to do with this summit today and tomorrow is to actually set the agenda, get the agenda clear about what the national plan will be doing next year. And there is very strong commitment from the government to the national plan. there is very strong financial commitment as well as political commitment to ensuring that the new national plan, the next national plan, will be well funded and well targeted. Because, what we were doing 4 years ago is different to what we need to do in the next 4 years, or the next 10 years. So what we need to do is get together all these people who do have a large level of expertise and work with them and make sure that they put forward the best possible solutions to the government. And then the pressure is on the government to accept those solutions. And I also need to declare my interest, Kieran, because I always do. I sit on the board of Our Watch, and we're very much in the fray about prevention of domestic violence and working with the government to work out how we can do that as well.
Yeah, well, the good thing is that there is bipartisan and support and willingness to back whatever initiative is going to work, and we hope that everything can be put into it in terms of resources and whatever else needs to be done. Emma, when we talk in the short term about the risk facing the nation, it's obviously the COVID risk in the next couple of months. It really is an uncertain time. The hospital's under strain, and just ahead of us getting to that critical mass, those thresholds of vaccinations that we need to be at.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty obvious. We've seen reports in the Nine papers and the Saturday paper and others over the weekend about this strain that our hospital system's already under. And if I can, I don't do this often, talk about my personal life, but I've had 2 close family members in hospital for extended periods of time over the last couple of months, and things are not operating as normal. That's here in Melbourne, both in private hospitals for various reasons. One of my family members discharged really before ready and quite openly said to him, we need to clear the decks. We are getting more and more COVID patients coming in. And another one, very isolated, very unwell, very confused, elderly member of our family who has not been able to have visitors for a couple of weeks, and the communication from the hospital is less than we would normally expect. That's because the frontline workers are under so much pressure already. And what we're seeing today in the announcements is we're not expecting cases to peak in New South Wales and Victoria for another 3 to 4 weeks. We don't know, particularly in New South Wales, what that's going to mean for our hospital system. But if we listen to those people actually on the front lines, we should be getting very, very worried about our capacity to cope with the peaking cases in a few weeks' time.
Kerry, we're almost out of time, but just quickly, if you can, your thoughts on the stress that is facing those frontline workers?
Well, Kieran, I think both the Premier of New South Wales and the Health Minister have been very upfront about the stress that the health system is under, but they're also being very upfront about the fact that it's coping. They're saying that, yes, they're actually looking to have the peak in 2 or 3 weeks. Absolutely, that's correct. But they've been planning for the last 18 months as to how to cope with that stress and how to cope with that peak. And they are confident. Okay. They're confident that, yes, they absolutely acknowledge that the frontline staff are doing an amazing and extraordinary job, but they're also reassuring the New South Wales community that they are not to be afraid of the fact that the health system won't be able to cope. It will not collapse. It's being tested. It's being geared up. It will actually manage even in these terribly difficult circumstances.
Kerry Chikarovski, Emma Dawson.